Okay. Just as long as I'm not making a really weird face when they start the video, because that's always what's posted. Your mouth's open. Yes, those kind of looks. So welcome. Thank you for joining us today in our Legacy Path series. Today we're going to be talking about preparing for adolescence. So I'm going to start us off here and then pass things off to Pastor Stephen. Right now, I want to share some background information. First of all, when I was right out of college, I was so excited about teaching that I took the first job that was offered to me, which happened to be middle school. So, yeah, laughing. I was up for some torture, I think. So, I taught middle school math and science for a very small private school. And this is the top age range of my training and my educational experience. And that was an interesting age group and quite a wild adventure. So I want to share some information that I learned in that process. This age group is very unique. Preteens are just entering the drama called adolescence. Their bodies will change a lot in just a few months with massive growth spurts. The girls are ahead of the guys in the developmental process. One of the biggest shifts at this age is a complete change in the way a preteen thinks. It's at this age that kids go from a more literal, concrete view that they've been using for the past 8 years of their life to living a thinking process called metacognition. Basically, they are able to think about thinking. So if you ask them to analyze study techniques, things like that, they're able to do that, or consider other viewpoints. This is the first time that they're able to consider that. So it's they're starting to develop that ability to think about others and what they're thinking, which means all of a sudden at this age, they go from being blissful, uninhibited, to caring about what others think. What they think of them, what it means to fit into a group, feeling about being left out or caring about their peers, what they're seeing. They're starting to realize that there are other opinions, other values, other viewpoints than theirs, and that's a whole new world that they're being exposed to and having to learn how to regulate and navigate this new view. Just to add a little more drama to this huge change that's taking place, the early adolescent brain is also evolving with regards to the emotional development in ways that make kids both more sensitive to other emotions and to those around them. They develop a heightened reaction to emotions, but their brain development lags behind in the region that regulates their emotions. So this is where they have these huge emotions to what's around them, but they don't know how to process it. They don't know how to think. If you ask them, you know, what are you feeling? It's kind of like, I don't know. The tweens are fumbling with the ability to interpret other people's emotions and even their own. It's a tough stage, and a lot of parents talk about how suddenly their children are really moody. It's normal for kids at this age to have these really intense swings of emotions and interpersonal dynamics. Here, I should have switched to this here. So we're looking at some of the characteristics of adolescence. One day their friend is their very best friend in the whole world, and the next day they will never be my friend ever again. So it's one of those phases that they're going through. So it can be really hard for parents at this age. Spiritually, what does this look like? So spiritually, with this new depth of thinking and feeling, preteens are beginning to realize that choices are complicated. We talk about that complicated metacognition, emotions. So spiritually, what does that mean? They begin to realize their choices are complicated, that they can choose to sin, and they do choose to sin. They realize that for once. For children who have been made professions of faith, assurance of salvation is a great conversation to have at this time. For children who have not made a decision to trust Christ, a clear presentation of the gospel with understanding theological explanation is very important. Spiritual conversations may have to fight through the clutter of new hormone-induced awareness of the opposite sex. Spiritual questions may revolve around hypothetical situations, because that's not as personal and you don't get the emotional reaction that you do if you name names. So just hypothetically, what would happen if this happened? Those kind of conversations are very beneficial. You will also need to work through a lot of false information and the onslaught of worldly beliefs that are thrown at our children. But there is good news. According to almost every study, parents are still the primary guides for adolescents at this age. Intentional and challenging discipleship at the church creates great platforms for the needed parent interaction that is occurring. So think about that. This is where it's really important that your kids are coming to church, you're having conversations, talking to them about what they're learning, using that as a platform to continue that conversation and that guidance that they need so much at this age. With parents being the primary guides, it is vital that parents engage in conversations with their children, no matter how awkward that is. To help walk you through some of these conversations, Gospel Baptist Church recommends this book, Preparing for Adolescence. I tried to find a picture of the book, but I couldn't, but there's the author up there. This is by Dr. James Dobson. I have to share my personal story with this book. Chris did a lot of discussion and work with Wyatt, my older son, and I would encourage fathers to be an active part in guiding their sons through this stage. But with him passing away, the preparing for adolescence stage fell primarily on me for Wesley. And I did drag my feet quite a bit, I have to admit. Finally finishing this book not long ago. My son's turning 13 this weekend, so I'm a little bit behind. We recommend closer to 10 years of age to be doing this. So I was dragging my feet, but I was determined to get through this before Wesley turned 13. And so ideally at the age of 10, not 12, but it's better late than never. I especially was avoiding the chapter called Something Crazy is Happening to My Body. That was just, I have to admit that, which goes through the physical changes of adolescence and explains it to the kids. The chapters are fairly long, and I would read part of a chapter before bedtime with Wesley, and we would review the previous night's readings, then read some together, and then follow up with some questions. It's really kind of the routine we were doing. And finally, that dreaded chapter came up. I was sweating, stammering, struggling through it, and after I was all done, I asked Wesley if he had any questions afterwards, and this is the statement I got. Did you know that it's illegal to sleep naked in Minnesota? Now, if you know Wesley, that's a very much Wesley comment. So I was here sweating it. Literally, that was the statement I got. So just realize that we're putting a lot of pressure on ourselves as parents in struggling through this. And really, it's not as traumatic to the kids. And really, they are completely accepting of these conversations. So it's not as bad as you're telling yourself as a parent. It'll be fine. So I confirmed with a few questions. He did understand what I was reading, but it wasn't nearly as traumatic as I thought it was going to be. In fact, I found this book wonderful in opening up some conversations and helping me understand what my preteen is experiencing as well in different stages. And to explain what this looks like, this is written addressing the preteen. So it's not addressing the parents, although there are times in there that it talks about if you're reading with your parent, you may want to ask them these questions or talk to them about this. So it is meant to be a team read for both of you, but it also is kind of directed more for the teenagers. Some of the topics it covers. So there it is listed up there. It talks about self-esteem because at this age they very much think that I'm just not good enough for a lot of different things. So it's a lot of negative talk, peer pressure, bullying, the physical changes that I just discussed, love, and a lot of the misconceptions about love that society sends because they're going to be experiencing these emotions, these hormones, and what is real love. The emotions they're going through, explaining what's actually happening in their body, and they explain it from a physical standpoint, why you're feeling this way. And then at the very end, they have an open teen discussion where he was actually interviewing teenagers and having them share their input. And it's more of like a reader's theater format. But it was really neat because it's open discussion and they covered all kinds of things from drug use to the emotions to how they felt going through the stage in life and how their parents worked with them. So wonderful discussions that happened there. So I definitely would encourage you to read this with your child, hopefully before I did. But I'm going to turn this over to Pastor. Oh, one more thing. Other than just reading this, there is the encouragement to do a road trip. It's kind of a landmark phase in here. So something special to mark this stage in the journey with your child. Go on a road trip with them, experience something with them, and celebrate this phase in life. Pastor can cover that a little bit more, and I'm going to pass this off to him. So hopefully that you found that helpful.
Very much so. Thank you, Ms. Jenny. All right. So the design of this stage, actually really of a lot of these legacy path milestones, is built around the idea of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Have you heard that before? Yeah, I'm a big believer in that principle. We practice that in premarital counseling. When we do premarital counseling, it's built around helping them understand what's coming, how to prepare for it so that they don't have wrong expectations, and so that we can avoid some of the things we know are going to be pitfalls for them going into marriage. Well, the same idea is here as well, preparing for adolescence. If you think about in Scripture, when Jesus gives one of his most forceful challenges on children, he challenges and he says, it'd be better for you to have a millstone hanged about your neck and thrown into the sea than to cause one of these little ones to stumble. And I know we think adolescents and we think teenagers, right? But going into adolescence, they're still the children. And as adults, how cool would it have been to be able to take all the stuff we know about life now and go back and implant it in ourselves at 8, 9, 10, and have all that knowledge and information going through our teen years? Now, maybe you had great parents that did that with you, and maybe you didn't. But if you wish you had that, now is your chance to do that with your kid. And so that's what we want to encourage you to do. And some people may look at this and go, hey, 10 is a little too early, and I think that's because of our age, honestly. I remember going through sex ed in public school, which was actually taught as abstinence, very interestingly enough. But I remember learning that puberty hit about age 12. That's not true anymore. The statistics are that boys can start as early as 9.5 and girls can start as early as 8. Now, maybe your kid won't, but statistically, and there's lots of discussion around this, puberty is starting earlier, much earlier than it used to. And so the preteen season is hitting sooner than it used to. Now, I want to encourage you, your kid is going to go through puberty, right? I mean, that's not a surprise to any of us, but we know that's coming. We know that they're going to go through body changes, they're going to go through hormone changes, they're going to go through friend changes, they're going to go through identity changes. They're going to go through all those changes. The question is, are they going to have somebody to coach them through it? Or are we going to leave them to themselves and the influences of the world on them to coach them through it? Hopefully, in your mind, there's an obvious answer there. But before we talk about the students going through or your child going through their transition, let's talk for a minute about the parenting transition. I'm just going to lay this little microphone down here and hopefully it'll keep picking me up. But one of the things that I think is helpful for us is to be reminded that we're going through a transition just like the child is going through a transition. You see, when your child is born, they're born into your family and they're going to go through a lot of different seasons. And the end result is, the goal at the end is, they're going to leave home in adulthood. Now, we can talk about what age that is later, but point being, eventually that's going to happen. And there are essentially 4 stages of parenting that lead up to, that begin at birth and take us up to the adulthood, because they don't stop being our child just because they're an adult. But our way of relating to them is different at this season than it is at this season. And so when the child is born, your primary role is that of caretaker. It's your job to keep them alive, right? Feed them, clothe them, change diapers, keep them warm at night, get them medicine when they need it, all that kind of stuff. We're the caretaker. Our primary role is sustaining life so that the child can grow and thrive. But as they enter into the toddler season and most of the elementary years, this is what I call the commander season. Yes, we're still doing the caretaking stuff. We still need to feed them and clothe them. But now we move into, we're making choices for them. Now, before, they didn't even know there was a choice. They were hungry, they just opened their mouth and a bottle appeared and they got fed. But now they're entering into a season where they realize, hey, I'm hungry. There's lots of choices out there. And mom and dad are coming along and going, yes, there are, and you're going to have some healthy ones. You're going to have some balanced choices. You're going to clean your plate or you don't get dessert. We are in a season where we know the healthy choices that need to be made, and so we're making them for the child. Now, I'm not saying absolute 100% your kid can't pick what TV show they watch. That's not what we're talking about. But primarily, your role is to make the decisions that need to be made for the good and the healthiness of your child. It's Sunday, we're going to church because I know that's the best choice, and so we're going to go. It's time to go see the doctor, so we're going to go to the doctor because I'm the adult and I know that's the healthy choice and that's what we're going to do, and here we go. And so on and so forth. Well, somewhere in the preteen, early adolescent season, you shift from commander to does anybody know what goes in this slot here? Coach. So we're not walking away, right? We're not being absent from the child. And it's not like we've given up authority to make decisions in the important moments, but we're beginning to move more from, hey, you just listen to mom and dad will tell you what to do, you say yes ma'am, do it, to, hey, I want to explain a little more of this. I want to coach you to understand why. I want to help you see this from a bigger picture. I want to walk you through doing this on your own because at some point I'm going to step back and you're going to do it. And so you need to have some help learning how. And so we enter more into a coaching season where we're still right there with them, but we send them out to play the game, right? Like when you go to watch a Little League basketball game, the coach doesn't run around as one of the five on the court, at least hopefully not. There are kids on the court. The coach is still right there on the sideline, still ready to help, still in calling timeouts, still having practices, but they're not out there actually doing it. And so we understand as they're beginning to go into adolescence, they're beginning to make some of the choices for themselves. Now, exactly what choices they make and which ones you make and how often that happens and how far can you trust them and all that kind of stuff, that's a constant negotiation. It's you give some, and if they can be trusted, then you give them a little more, and so on and so forth. So the coaching season is what we're talking about here. And so as we go into this coaching season, we're going to have a little bit of struggle because we're going to be saying, okay, now it's time for you to decide what outfit you want to wear to school today. And they put on one and we go, oh dear Jesus, please don't tell me that's really what you want to wear. And so you have this season of going, oh, they're not making the choice I want them to make. And we have to wrestle with that internally. And that is a part of that process. But as we go through that time of giving them a little more leeway, giving them a little more space, giving them a little more responsibility, we can find that the children don't always handle that 100% the way that we want them to. And we need to be careful that in this season, as we move into that new paradigm and the student enters into a new paradigm, that we don't need to completely change everything we've always done. What we need to give them is consistent, steady, dependable parenting. In other words, your child comes and tells you a lie in the adolescent phase. Well, we don't go, well, that's okay. You're making your choices now, so if you want to lie, that's all right. No, lying is wrong. We've taught them as caretaker and commander that lying is wrong. We've given them enough room to go experience something and then be honest about it or not, and they've chosen not to. So we don't blow up, we don't burn the house down, we don't send them to military school. We remind them that lying is wrong because God says it's wrong. It offends His character. There's a consequence. We don't take it personally and try to lash out and correct every lie for the rest of their life when they're 10 years old. We continue coaching them steadily through truth. And so we continue with that steady, dependable parenting because everything else in their life is in turmoil. Everything else in their life is just crazy to them. And what they need are some godly parents who are consistently at home, consistently doing what they've always done, holding the line, holding the fort, and the kid gains a great security from knowing that mom and dad are the big people in this family and they know what's going on and I can trust them. And that will help your children tremendously as they're going through all these ups and downs. So preparing for adolescence, it is its own milestone. It's not the adolescent years. Really the teen years is a lot of times what we call them. We're not talking about the entire teen years. We're talking about preparing them for the teen years. So don't think that by doing the book, that means you're going to have a 30-minute conversation and then you're never going to have any more after that. No, you're having a 15-minute conversation that prepares them for what they're getting ready to experience. And then through the teen years, you'll have some more. You're not going to have a 15-minute conversation about dating, love, sex, and marriage at 10, and then you're done for the rest of their life. No, that's a 15-minute introduction to some of those things, and then those will continue through their teen years. And so this is us introducing the adolescents and preparing them for what's coming. It's far better for us to prepare them for some of the things that we think of as normal, but for them that can be traumatic if they don't know what's coming. And yet if they know it's coming, when it happens, they go, oh, that's what mom was talking about. Oh, that's what dad was talking about. And it's not a big deal. And they just keep on going and they don't think that they're an alien. So it's time to start transitioning some of the topics that you discuss with them. In our world, it is craziness now. There are debates about, what version of sex education needs to happen in the kindergarten classes. Well, I've got a crazy idea. How about none? Let's not have that conversation with the kindergartner at all. And when it's appropriate, like preteen adolescents, let's have a beginning conversation. And so we need to know, okay, there are things coming up in the life of my child, whether I want them to or not, they're going to start creeping in. And I need to begin having some of these conversations with them so that I'm the voice that's anchoring them. I'm the one that's coaching them through this and not the world. And so part of that transition is not only what topics you discuss, but beginning to have, and I mentioned it a little bit ago, beginning to have more of the why conversations as opposed to just what conversations. A few memories that I have of my dad during my teen years were the times that he and I would have conversations where I was doing a school project or something, and I knew what the answer was. I mean, I've been in church all my life. I knew what the answer was, and he would press me on why. But how's that going to work with everybody else? And all of a sudden, those realities began to go, oh, well, I never thought about it that way. Oh, well, I'd never asked that question before. Oh, well, I guess I need to think through. So though I might have known a factual answer, I hadn't really processed an understanding of a lot of those things. And so we need to begin to have those why conversations. And I would encourage you as parents to make one of the why conversations still having a framework for your child of when you are respectful, you earn the privilege to ask why. Because this is a big thing. One of the things that's going to happen is as their hormones rage up, they're going to have a tendency to think they can lash out at you like you're one of their buddies. And you need to draw a clear line that says, no, that's not how it works. When you treat me with respect, then you can ask any why question you want to, and we'll discuss it. And I'll share with you whatever you want to know. But if you come blasting at me and you're sassing me and you've got a bad attitude and you're disrespectful, I'm sorry, you're going to have to go straighten that out and come back and try again. So it's real important we keep those parameters of I'm the parent, you're the child in place, even as we're having those why conversations. So my recommendation for the adolescence book is to either read it with your child or to assign them a chapter. And based on a similar experience with Miss Jenny, I would encourage you to give them a deadline. Say, okay, Johnny, you need to have chapter 1 of this book read by 2 weeks away, or next Sunday, or whenever you pick. I would give them plenty of time, don't make it in 5 minutes, but give them a deadline, tell them what chapter you expect for them to read, and let them know. Now you're going to read that, and then we're going to sit down, and we're going to look at a couple of things in the chapter, we're going to talk about it, we're going to see if you have any questions, and I'm probably going to start sharing with you some of the things from my life, maybe to help you understand these as we go through. So have them read it, or read it together, then sit down and discuss it. I would recommend you go through it one chapter at a time. More than that might just overwhelm them, either trying to remember what they read, or it might just turn into such a long conversation that that preteen brain, they just kind of zone out and they get lost and they're not really sure what you're talking about anyway. So I would encourage you to do that. When you get to the body changes chapter, the sexual issues, I would encourage you to remember there's a whole milestone on the legacy path for sexual purity. So don't think that as you get to that topic now, I've got to explain it all, cover it all, convince them of it all, and get them to make a commitment. No, you're just introducing them to, you're going to go through changes, and the world's going to look a little different when you go through those changes. That's all you've got to do at this phase, and the book does an excellent job of helping them see that change is coming. And so I would encourage you to be honest with them, be straightforward with them, but remember, you don't have to cover it all in any one of these conversations. And then that celebration. I think it's really important that if we're going to mark these milestones, that we do it with something that's going to be memorable to the student. For you and I, remembering having those awkward conversations, that's going to be memorable for us. But for them, we want to do something that's going to mark it in their mind, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to set up a path and a pattern so that when they do reach this adulthood phase and they begin to walk with Christ as an adult and they look back, they're going to remember these milestones that we marked out in their life, instead of childhood just being this strange blur that they don't really remember. No, we want to give them some anchor points, some memorials to go back to, and so we want to give them something that they're going to remember. One of them that I had a privilege of doing with our oldest was about the time we were finishing this book. There was a missionary in our church that needed, and we were in Northern Virginia, needed a ride to the airport in Washington, D.C. Well, at the time of day he needed to go, and the way it worked out, it was about an hour and a half drive, and so I had Jackson ride with me to go on that trip to take them and drop them off. But then once I dropped them off, that gave us some time to hang out together, and then another hour and a half drive back home that day. And so that was kind of my introduction to making a memorial, making a dedicated special event to mark completing this book together. I would encourage you to do something like a road trip that doesn't have to be that. If you come up with something better, please feel free to do that. It's just that we don't want to go, hey, parents, prepare your kids for adolescence, figure it all out on your own. We want to give you as much as we can of recommendations and suggestions so that you don't feel like you're having to come up with this all from scratch. And so going through those things. On that road trip, I would encourage you to discuss a couple of future expectations for that child. You want to celebrate, hey, we did this, we had these conversations, you're set, you're ready to go, this is awesome. But to also point them forward to a couple of things. Like, for example, I would encourage you to go ahead at this point and let them know, hey, just so you know, here's what the dating age looks like in our house. Before this, they probably didn't care. They probably never even thought about a boyfriend or girlfriend because, the opposite sex has cooties, right? But now they're at this stage, they're probably beginning to see some of their friends pair off. They're starting to think about it, maybe starting to have some of those feelings themselves. And we just want to set that parameter. And so if your family says, hey, look, we're just not really going to get into the dating scene until after you're out of high school and marriage is an option, that's fine. If you want to say 16, wherever you're going to draw the line, just go ahead and lay that out for the child. I remember when I was entering my teen years, my parents sat me down and just said, hey, look, just so you know, dating is not going to happen until you're 16. At 16, we'll talk about whether you're responsible enough, whether you demonstrate that you can be trusted to date. So it wasn't even a guaranteed at 16, but I remember that as my friends were pairing off and as my friends were dating, as my friends were doing all kinds of stuff, all the way up through to 16, I remember just that conversation came up over and over again, and I knew I don't have to worry about this. It's not something I need to be bothered with because I know what my parents' rule is. So expectations for going through those teen years. If you've got other expectations or other ages that you want to give them, those kind of things, this is a great time to lay that out. Not specifically in the preparing for adolescence, but I'm going to make another recommendation at this age, specifically the going into the 6th grade. There's another book called The Entitlement Trap. This is something my parents did with me, we've done with our kids, and I can't recommend it highly enough. I think James Dobson actually has something behind this as well to encourage people to do this. But the principle is that as they're going into the teen years, you begin to let them experience and learn financial responsibility through handling finances. So again, in that coaching season, we're letting them learn adult level lessons without adult level consequences yet. That's kind of that in-between season. We want to maximize that. And so basically the practice is that at some age you decide, okay, what money I would normally spend on my child's school lunches and clothes and activities, etc., is going to be about this much money each month. Well, instead of me continuing to be the commander of anything and everything in their life, I'm now going to enter a coaching season. I'm going to give them the privilege to budget and manage those finances. So whatever money you would normally spend, that's what you give to them on a regular, recurring, consistent basis. And then they make the decisions about where they spend that money. Now, I would also recommend that for the first year or maybe 2, you let them know, I have all veto right in your life. I get to decide if that's a stupid decision because they're going to make a few of those. And at some point as a parent, you have to go, okay, that's a really dumb decision, but it's your money and it's not going to really harm you, and I think you'll learn from it, so I'm going to let you go ahead. You're going to have those moments, and that's okay, but this is a good season. This is a good age to do it. There are going to be times where they run out of money. Well, guess what? It's a lot better for them to run out of money in 7th grade and not be able to buy that new pair of tennis shoes they want, as opposed to being 25 and running out of money and being homeless. And I know that that's exaggeration, but that's exactly what we're talking about, is letting them learn that lesson of bad money management now so they don't have to learn it at 25 or 30, and the consequences are huge. So we give them that money. The entitlement trap goes through. It's important for them to understand that they're not just handed that money, but a part of that is that they're part of the family. They have responsibilities just because they live in the house with other people. So you're not paying them to make their bed. They make their bed because they have a bed. And if they're responsible, then they continue to get the benefits of living in the family as well. So they make their bed, they take out the trash, whatever assignments they have because they're in your family. If they have responsibility to be a part of the family, then they get the benefits of being in the family. So they get dinner, and they get to keep their bed. And they also get finances to go buy their clothes, because that's part of being in the family. And so at some point then you'll have to navigate, what does this look like if they get a job or when they get gifts from outside. This is also a great time to teach your kids what tithing looks like. I mean, it's really simple over and over again. They get an allowance, if you want to call it that, from you. And then you go, okay, so what's the first thing you do with it? A tithe. And then they take out their tithe and they put it in their Bible. All right, what else do we do with it? Well, I got to save 10%. And then they take 10% out and put it in a piggy bank. And so whatever process you come up with, but at this stage is a great season to begin that, because it's a very hands-on coaching issue in their life. And looking back in my teen years, I don't know that there was any one thing my parents did that I appreciated more than allowing me to learn those finance lessons early on. I can honestly say that Miss Rebecca and I, kind of like Paul, we've learned how to be poor and how to be, well, relatively rich to when we were poor. But there were seasons where we literally, I mean, every penny was counted out because I was only making a certain amount and there wasn't any more coming in, and somehow we got to pay the bills. But it wasn't a problem because I'd learned that discipline. I'd learned how to do that process as a teenager, and I knew, okay, here's what I need to do. And so we worked on it and we made it through those seasons, and God's been very gracious to us since then. All right, so that's the majority of, that's what we have to encourage you in this milestone number 4, the preparing for adolescence. Does anybody have any questions or anything that I missed before we turn off the camera and be done? I don't have anybody texting in from the internet world today, do we? Yeah.